Gold Paladin found itself a new leader, and with him, he brings in a new storm that will change the clan forever.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfight, welcome to the very first set review of the Mysterious Fortune, and we kick off this new set with Gold Paladin. And this Gold Paladin set is very unique in the reboot because it's the very first Gold Paladin set that doesn't focus on Ezel or in any shape or form is going to support Ezel directly, which is very strange and also a breath of fresh air, as we already have 3 set wave of Gold Paladin and all 3 were focused around the Ezel Superior Right Chain or the Ezel engine in general. So this new Agravain support set as well as the super aggressive Gold Paladin cards are gonna change the clan and gonna take the clan into a more super aggressive direction. And with that we see a lot of interesting new skill design and strategies. So without further ado, let's jump right into these new cards, as there are a lot of interesting things to talk about and we want to jump in as soon as possible. So first off, this set has of course some reprint triggers, and in this case we have 4 different reprints. 1 crit, 1 front, 1 heal, and 1 draw trigger. All of them 1 star, as they're just generic reprints, and that's what I usually give them. This set also provides us with a brand new starter, as we don't have to rely on the Ezel starter anymore, and in this case that is Spring Breeze Messenger. But just like all the other starters, I'm only gonna give it 1 star, as it's just a palette swap starter and it doesn't really do anything besides that. This set also provides us with yet another 9k grade 1 in the likes of Demonic Light Gemstone Molmuteus. But as I just stated, it's once again a 9k grade 1, which we already had access to, so it's for me a 1 star, as it already isn't an ideal vanilla card and we already have a copy of it. But the following vanilla is a very unique one, as just like the Tachikaze set from the previous set, we've got a interesting base power vanilla, as we have this grade 3 Lone Gull, and it's a 24k base power vanilla card with the only restriction that it has a continuous skill. You cannot write this card, include superior write. So unlike the Tachikaze one, you cannot actually superior write this through special means. So yeah, we cannot cheese this in any shape or form, but it's an interesting vanilla type, as 24k power is a lot of power, especially for an Exo clan, as on an Exo 2, that's 29, on Exo 1, that's a 34. So yeah, that beats over defensive triggers, and that's what, especially the now Gold Paladin with Agravain, has issues with, as most of the attacks won't hit for high enough numbers unless you're gonna invest more resources into them, that they can beat over defensive triggers. So having a vanilla base unit that hits over that is pretty nice. The only issue with this card is, and what makes it a bad card in general, is because you cannot write it, you're stuck with a grade 3 in hand if you don't have another grade 3, and you cannot even G-assist. So you're stuck on grade 2 with any way out of that, unless you can ditch this card through a different kind of means. So yeah, for that I'm only gonna give it 2 stars, as it's an interesting card. It does fix, or it does synergize with the clan in some capacity, and if you can call it with all the superior calls effect, it's pretty nice. But besides that, yeah, it has some big downsides. And this set also provides us with the drop draw grade 1 PG for Gold Paladin, and in their case that's Repulse Rod Angel. And just like all the other grade 1 drop draw PGs, I'm gonna give it 3 stars, as it just opens up more deck design and more space design, and with the addition of the new crits and fronts from the previous set, we now finally can facilitate them without losing out on PGs. Now we're gonna do it a little bit differently. As per usually, I go over all the different cards, separated in chunks of support ranges, if they're archetype specific or just general and that kind of stuff, and then I end up with the VR. But from this point onward, whenever we start with the general support, I will showcase the VR skill first, so you have an inkling idea of what the VR is going to do, and we can discuss on a more informed basis how these cards interact with the new mechanic. Then you have to wait and see at the end, then things start to click. In this case, the chance of you overlooking certain interactions will diminish quite rapidly. So with that said, let's jump right into their new VR, that is Knight of Fury Agravain. And this new VR for Gold Paladin has the following 2 skills: Auto Vanguard Circle, when it attacks, cost Counterblast 1, and put all of your regrets into the soul. Look at the same number of cards from the top of your deck as the number of rearguards you called this turn, call any number from among them to the rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. So basically what this card does is it checks for the amount of units you called this turn, and this counts calling from hand or superior calling, any way, shape or form you're calling units, this counts, or rearguards. And then on attack, you check the same number of cards you called, and from those cards you can basically call all of them if you want to, as it's the same number again. This card basically allows you to flood the board for a second time to unleash a lot of attacks, and that for one counterblast is pretty big. And you don't really mind this on board as everything is shoved into the soul, which you then can utilize for different skills that are focusing on their cost with Soul Blast. So it's a pretty good card for allowing you to multi-attack. And that Soul Blast cost basically fuels into his second ability, as that is act on Vanguard Circle, cost Soul Blast 12, and until the end of this fight, your opponent can only call normal units, includes superior calls. So this means if you activate that ability, they can no longer call triggers to the rearguard circle as well as guardian circle. They can no longer create tokens, so plant tokens, vision token, the new Arsha token, also the Evo decoy tokens are all completely shut down. So if your opponent's deck relies on that mechanic, they're basically sitting ducks. And the final thing is, if you're using this card in premium, you also negate G-Guardians, as they can no longer call G-Guardians to the guardian circle. So this thing can shut down a lot of options. The only problem is the Soul Blast 12 is quite heavy, and it's very unlikely that you can use it in a most consistent way than you like to. It's basically a last ditch resort when the game is prolonged to a certain extent, and you now suddenly can activate this ability to actually finish the deal. Because if you use this and you then combine it with this first ability, you're probably going to kill your opponent, as their guarding potential is diminished so rapidly. It's insane, because this thing also negates protect markers from the protect 1 type. So now that you have an idea about what this card can do, let's dive into the other cards, and then we come back to this card once again at the end of the video, and then I'm gonna give you my rating and the overall gist of how this card interacts with the rest of the support series. So we start off with the general support line that can be used in any type of deck, and the first one that we're gonna cover is this great one, Little Battler Tron, and its abilities are auto and rearguard circle. When placed, costs counter plus 1, and this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. So basically on place, if you want to give this unit more power, it can turn into a 13k beater or booster, and on Excel 1, 23, and Excel 2, 18. So it can make solid numbers if you need to. But the new deck doesn't really use that much counterblast, only Agravain, and the deck is going to be very rushed focused. So you usually have the room to use 1 or 2 counterblasts for other type of skills, so it could be this one, so it's not really that bad. And then we have a second ability, and that's the main usefulness of this card. That's auto Vanguard to rearguard circle. When an attack hits the Vanguard, if your Vanguard's grade is less than or equal than your opponent, look at the top card of your deck and call it to rearguard circle. So it's a on-hit Vanguard rearguard skill that allows you to call the top card and then have multi-attack going, and it is free. So that's a big thing. It's a free potential plus that allows you to multi-attack. That's big. The only downside to this card is that it needs to hit, and not necessarily it needs to hit, including also the attack that it boosts. So you're forced to call this thing in the front row, and with only an 8k body, that might be a little bit awkward. Yes, we have the first ability that can counter plus 1, make it into a 13k, and with extra 1 and 2, then this could basically be somewhat combated, but then again, it's still not super ideal. It has some synergy with other cards, which we go into in more detail as we're progressing with the cards in this video. But overall, I only think it's a 3-star card, as yes, it's a nice plus, but not necessarily in every situation. Early game, this can be very nice as a Vanguard unit, as you're forcing your opponent to guard the attack, and then if they take it and they don't get a defensive trigger, you basically have an extra attack. You want down to this, if they get the defensive trigger, you're still forced to call that card. So if it's trigger, yeah, not so great. Then next off, we have a new grade 3 with the actual marker. That is Knight of Unison, Uzel. And its ability is auto Vanguard to rearguard circle. At the beginning of your main phase, this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn for each of your rear guards. So basically, this is a giant beat stick. The only downside is with Agravain is that it then immediately will be shoved back into the soul once you resolve that skill, so you cannot keep getting more value off the card. It can also be a combination with Garmor, which then have the resist clause with it if you have only one card in hand and you're probably going to have a full field, so it can also work with that as a giant beater. But overall, because it's a grade 3 and you have typically better grade 3s and it doesn't really synergize as ideally with every type of engine, but it does synergize in a basic sense, I think it's a solid 2-star card that might be run in some decks by a 1-off or a 2-off as just a beat stick and not really necessary as a key engine piece. Because the main issue is with the card is that the value comes only the following turn. So if you call it mid-battle or in the main phase, it's just a 12k that doesn't really do anything. So the fact that you need to wait a turn for it to get value makes it a little bit awkward in some sense. Then from the pseudo Garmor support, we go into actual Garmor support, or at least they have a similar clause to Garmor, which makes them synergizes with the deck. And we started with this grid 1, Knight of Virtuosius Intellect, Gunhild. And Gunhild ability is continues a ring at the Guardian Circle. If your hand has 1 or less card, this unit gets power plus 5k, shield plus 5k, and intercept, and can intercept from the back row. This is excellent for Garmor, as Garmor's main clause, and especially with this card, you want to have only 1 card or less in hand to activate your abilities or get more value out of your cards. But the problem is by fulfilling that condition, you leave yourself open for basically any type of attack, as you cannot really guard effectively. This card combats that in the fact that it can be in the back row, so it's safe for most harm, and then is a 15k interceptor, which is a lot of shield. But also in the case that you don't need to use it, it's a 13k booster or attacker. That's a pretty solid number, especially if you have a lot of attack. And with Garmor's skill that then also can distribute even more power to the field, this is a nice addition for the build, and can also be used in builds outside of Garmor, as it is a standalone card and can be used for those clutch moments where you're losing out on shield value and you want a bit more utility options available to you. So for that, I think it's a solid 3-star card, as it supports Garmor quite effectively and has some niche options for decks outside of that engine. Then another support card, we have this grade 2, that is Demonic Crystal Mobilization Koiras. And Koiras' ability is Auto Rigard Circle. When placed, if your hand has 1 or less cards, cost Soul Blast 1, and until the end of turn, this unit gets boost and power plus 10k. The problem what I have with this card is that its condition is when placed, meaning you can only get 1 activation, and then also you need to pay a Soul Blast. You're putting yourself already in an awkward position and almost a sure defeat situation where you're going to lose the match. And then you need to pay resources, and it's also a one-time use. And also the fact that you need to place it from hand with 1 less card means that you need to place it in such a way that once this hits the field, you have only 1 or less card in hand. So either it needs to be your last 2 card, or it needs to be your last card. Meaning if you run multiple copies of this thing, and you have multiple copies in your hand, you basically have some vanilla card in your hand. For only 19k booster for one-time use, yeah, sure, it can be very good in offensive plays. How much difference is it gonna make? Unlike the grade 1, it also gives you defensive value. This is pure offensive that might not even be good enough to close the game or justify that you're playing with 1 card or less for most of the game. So yeah, for that I'm gonna give it 1 star. It might suddenly have a usefulness in the future, but for now, I'm not seeing it. Then another Garmor support card that's actually famous for not being a Garmor, but being used in premium with Ultima, and that is Providential Angel. And its ability is Act on Rigard Circle. If your hand has 1 or less cards, cost counter plus 1. Until the end of turn, your opponent can only call a total of 1 Sentinel from hand. And this unit gets power plus 10k. So a couple of things important about this card. It's not a once per turn, so you can stack it up if you have excess amount of counterblast, so it can be a very solid beater. And then the fact that you limit your opponent for only using 1 Perfect Guard a turn can be devastating. You already are swinging in with a lot of attacks, so sure, Perfect Guards might not be the effective way to guard against your multi-attacking, but then again, if you have, and this also with premium Ultima in mind, if you have 5-6 attacks that come in for high numbers, potentially with multiple crits, and if your opponent does have a sizable hand size, and they do have a couple of PGs, by eliminating the fact that they basically have a couple of dead cards in hand, that can give you gains that otherwise wouldn't be resulting in a win. And that is the power of this card, as it just negates cards. If we ever get back into a meta with a more dominant protect scene, then this will only become better and better as you know what kind of value you're going to get out of the one single counterblast. So for that, yeah, it's a solid 4-star card for me, as yeah, it makes the Ultima Ezel or Gold Paladin turn even more deadly, and it has a lot of potential in the future when Protect is getting more support. And usually when other clans get support, your cards typically don't get better, but in this case, it does. Then we have some extra generic support, and we have this great one that is Interlude Angel. And its ability is on a rearguard circle. When placed by a card ability, put this unit into your soul, look at the top card of your deck, and call it the rearguard circle. So overall, this isn't really an ideal card, as in any other type of deck, what's the point of running this? As what it actually entices is that instead of that you call this card, you call the following card on top of your deck. But by running this card in your deck, and this was then the card you called, this could also be any other card that you then could put in your deck that's better than calling this card. So by running an effectively worse card, then have the chance of potentially calling a better card, yeah, that's not the way that I see that's useful for the deck. However, the saving grace of this card is the fact that by calling this card, you get to call another card, and a card goes into your soul. That should basically hint you where this card was designed for. This is most definitely a support card for Agravain, as it gives you 1 soul and gives you 1 extra call. So it makes both skills perform better. And that's the only saving grace to this card, because they also thought it has to be on the 7k body. Don't know why, but yeah, they decided for that. So all in all, 2 stars for me. It's almost a 1-star, but because it can synergize with Agravain to some extent to maybe go for that Soul Blast 12 a little bit better, or getting that 1 more extra call out of it to have more options to it, gives it somewhat a notch out of that 1-star range. Then another card, and it's one of my favorite cards in this set, and that is this grade 2 Cloudwing Eagle. And its ability is Auto Vanguard and Vanguard Circle. When your other unit is placed, this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. Activates when guardians are placed. So if you haven't seen my set breakdown of this set, I went in depth about this card. But basically, with all that information, it's a 3-star card for me. And to summarize what this card can do, it can become a massive beatstick, especially in combination with Agravain during either moments of Agravain, before you use the ability, and even after you use the ability. Before you use the ability, you can call this thing, then call a shitload of other cards, and that thing will become a solid beater. But also, if you call it from the top X amount of cards, when calling all those units in the field, this unit will gain the power of all the other cards that called at the same time. So once again, you have a massive beater. But also, it is a good synergy card with premium aspect, as if it's a rearguard unit, when you ride to grade 3, it gains power. When you stride, it also gains power. All the strides in Gold Paladin superior calls, so it will gain even more power. But also, as a Vanguard unit, by calling Guardians, you turn this thing into a 10k. Then call another Guardian, 15k. And it will be until the end of turn. So when you're up against an aggressive deck, maybe in a mirror match, having this on grade 2 when your opponent is going first can be your saving grace. As you can just call maybe a draw trigger, 5k shield, which then suddenly becomes a lot better. And maybe another couple of cards. And suddenly your opponent cannot even hit you anymore. Yeah, that's pretty good. But there's still some downside to it, because it's a 5k, it relies on calling multiple cards, and that does have some implications with it. So for that, it's a 3-star card, but a pretty versatile and solid 3-star cards, if you ask me. Then we go into a unique series of cards that works with a special type of condition, where you either need to call 2 cards to activate an ability, or you need to call 4 more cards to also activate a different aspect of that ability. And the first one of these cards we're gonna cover is yet again a card that has been famous for everything but Agravain, and that is Night of Resolution, Bethes. And this card has been known thanks to the World Championship Finals, where it was used in combination with the Gold Paladin GB8. And the reason for that is because of her following skill, that is continuous on rearguard circle. This unit gets all of the effects below according to the number of rearguards called during this turn. 2 or more, this unit gets power plus 5k, so it turns into a 10k unit from the 5k base. And 4 or more, this unit does not rest when it boosts. So basically we get a Frog Raider for Gold Paladin that isn't keyword bound. In general sense, this is pretty nice in a clan that can multi-attack. But the problem is in standard and currently the way how Gold Paladin is played is that besides the GB8, there isn't really a way to abuse this ability that it can basically be restanding or basically keep boosting for multi-attack. Because we're not actually actively multi-attacking by calling more units in front of this unit like Gold Paladin used to do that in the Gurgit days. So yes, we have Agravain, but the problem is with Agravain, you're shoving it into the soul, so it's gone. Then with Essel, yeah, we have that one time when we use it with Platinum where we call it once again, so it is, you can boost it twice, which can be nice, which then result into a 10k buff to another unit. But then again, we have Hoel, so yeah, what's the point if we have Hoel that can also give the unit a passive 10k and it can itself then boost if we need to. So overall, I can only give it a 3-star card as it is an interesting thing. It allows us to get some more use out of on the field. It also can interact with some multi-attack potential, but its main use comes from the GB8, but besides that, it doesn't really synergize that well with the clan as a whole. Maybe when we get more support, which I'm guessing we're going to get at some point where we're going to get more different types of multi-attacking that isn't in the same way that we're used to right now, which will make this card better, as its ability to not be able to rest if you call it enough can be really strong, especially if you hit some triggers and you put it on this thing and you have an insane column that keeps swinging at your opponent's face, and yeah, that can result into game. Then we go into this grade 2, and that is Knight of Phosphorus, Lang Li. And this grade 2 has the following ability: continues a rearguard circle, it gets all the effects below according to the number of rearguards you called this turn. 2 or more, your opponent cannot intercept. 4 or more, this unit gets power plus 5k. So it can either block your opponent from intercepting, or it blocks your opponent from intercepting and it becomes a 14k beater. Which is nice because it can potentially be a 24k beater on Axel 1. Overall, give this card a 3-star rating, as yes, it is a nice beater, but you need to call a lot of cards just to get the basic increment of power. But the opposite of this card is that it can block your opponent from intercepting, which can be very good against defensive clans, but also against other Axel clans, which have a lot of grade 2s on the front row, and this way you eliminate all the potential shield value and you can potentially go for game. Then we followed up with new grade 1 that is basically Young Gurgit, as that is Knight of Sound Health, Kunadegius. And Kunadegius' ability is auto rearguard circle. When it boosts, if your Vanguard is Knight of Fury Agravain, perform all of the effects below according to the number of rearguards you called this turn. 2 or more, until the end of the battle, the boosted unit gets power plus 3k. 4 or more, that unit gets power plus 5k until the end of battle. So, unlike typically the other cards that gain itself power, this one gives the power to the boosted unit. It can either give it 3k or it gives it 8k. That sounds okay, as it can give a unit more power, and if that unit can restand on its own, then it can get more value out of the power, but golds don't have really restanding rearguard, so over you or Vanguard, so it doesn't really do that much. And if you combine it with that, then why not use Hoel? As Hoel gives the unit in front of it a passive 5k, and if you have a Kaiden on the field, it gives it a passive 10k. The only downside is that you need to have 2 cards for that, and the unit needs to be called that turn, but for Gold Paladin that won't be that hard to do. So in those scenarios, that card will be better. Also, this card has a problem that it's restricted behind the fact that you need Knight of Fury Agravain, so it's even more restricted than something like Hoel and Kaiden. The only opposite of this card is that it works really well with Knight of Fury Agravain, as it can be the booster behind Agravain, then boost, it gives Agravain the power, and then you use Agravain's ability to shove everything in the soul, because the problem with Agravain's ability is that it can't really be boosted by a unit, as you remove the booster the moment you resolve its skill, making it a 12k attack, and against force numbers, that's not great. Also against other clans that have a defensive trigger before you attack with the Vanguard, it's also not great. So this way combat it in some regard, and you are then sure of the value if you need to call this thing at the end of last turn, or you call this turn, and that is an upside. But in the same regards, it's almost as effective as calling an Hoel of Agravain's ability, and then you call it behind the Vanguard. So yeah, I can only give this one 2 stars, as it's not outright completely useless, as it synergizes with Agravain to some extent, but it's definitely not the best card you can hope for. And it's sad because I really like the artwork of this card. Then we go into the last of these cards with these 2 to 4 call conditions, and that is Knight of Hard Work, Eleanor. And Eleanor is outright the best card of this series, and therefore she gains definitely 5 stars. And the reason for that is because of her skill, as her skill is auto on rearguard circle. When it attacks, perform all the effects below according to the number of rearguards you called this turn. 2 or more, this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of the battle. 4 or more, then you may have this unit get power plus 10k. If you do, at the end of the battle, put this unit into your soul. So outright, just for calling less than Langley, it already becomes a 14k beater. So it's better than Langley in that sense. But then if you call 4 or more, it gains an additional 10k and it becomes a 24k beater, just like the 24k Grade 3 Vanilla. Axel 2, 29k, which is very solid, and on Axel 1, a 34k. That's an insane number you can generate for an Axel clan that can multi-attack for a lot of attacks. And yes, it needs to be put into the soul, but you don't really care for that, as it's already going into the soul with something like Agravain. So yeah, for that even that interactions makes the card even better in a very specific situation, because if you attack with this thing, put it into the soul with its own ability, and you have a little Battler Tron onto the field, you attack with it, and if that thing hits, you can then call the top card of your deck, and this way you call even more units to the field without calling units over each other, which will make Agravain even better, as you will get more calls and also generate more soul faster. So yeah, is that the reason why it gets 5k? No, because that's a very niche situation and probably won't ever happen, because this is a 24k beater, and if that attacks and your opponent gets defensive trigger, then what's Tron gonna do? But in reverse, that's the reason why this card is so good. It's such a high number, and in a clan that multi-attacks a lot, especially with the new deck, they need high beat sticks to overcome defensive triggers. And if you call this thing in your first wave of attacks, and you can call multiple cards to basically load your Agravain, then this thing becomes a solid beater and can be your last attack before your Vanguard attacks, meaning if they get a defense trigger mid-turn, it can still pressure them. And if you call this thing off of Agravain, that's even better, because then you get a solid attacker for that turn, and then next turn when you start calling more cards, it can then also reload with more power. So yeah, a pretty good versatile card, and that's why it's definitely a 5-star card, and can even be used in other decks outside of the Agravain engine, as it can interact to some extent with Ezel, because Ezel, the Platinum version, can still call a lot of cards mid-battle, which can fuel this card's conditions, and then you have a solid attacker in Ezel as well, which is also an archetype that lacks in some consistency concerning the power level of its rearguards. Next up, we've got basically direct support cards for Agravain, and first, we have this direct grade 2 support, and that's Liberator of the Flute, Escrad. And its ability are auto on Vanguard to rearguard circle. When placed, if your Vanguard is Knight of Fury Agravain or Liberator of the Flute Escrad himself, look at the top card of your deck, call to rearguard circle, cost, counter +1, and this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. So where Little Battler Tron is on attack for the effect, this one is on place, having himself or Agravain as a Vanguard. This makes it somewhat more restrictive than all the other cards, because it can only work with Agravain or himself. So if you have it on turn 2, then that's fine, but once you exceed turn 2, if you run it in any other deck, it becomes a dead card. But for Agravain, this is perfect, because one card from hand turns into 2 calls. And that can help you fuel your front row. It can also help you load Agravain's ability. And having the addition to the counter +1 giving 5k power, turning him into a 40k beater or a 90k or 24k beater is pretty nice. So it can help you hit your opponent or hit over defensive triggers. So all in all, it's a very good rounded out card. Also, it helps you with the second wave of attacks, because if this thing is placed with Agravain's ability, but the rest of your top cards weren't really all that eventful or all that useful, this way you can have a second way of calling a new card. The only problem is, just like Tron, you're forced to call the card. You're forced to resolve the skill. So if it's a trigger, you're shit out of luck. Yeah. So because it's restrictive and you're forced to call the card, it makes it a little bit worse, but it's such a good card for Agravain, and almost an essential piece for the engine. So for that, I'm going to give it 4 stars. If you had more control over it, yeah, that would have been a 5-star card. But sadly, that's not the case. Then next, we've got the main grade 3 support for the new Agravain build. But this card can be used in basically any Gold Paladin build. And that is full Cavalier Dragon. And its ability is act on Vanguard to Vanguard Circle once per turn, soulless 1, look at the top card of your deck, call it to Vanguard Circle, and one of your Vanguards gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. So basically, this is a different version of Sacromore. As Sacromore is unplaced, you soulless 1, you draw a card and then call something from your hand to the field. This card is the same cost, almost same effect, only it's an act ability, so you have a bit more control, only you cannot use it to multi-tag. But this sadly can only call the top card, so you have less control of what you call, but because you can use it in the main phase, you can reuse it, meaning it's not a one-use card effect, means you get more value out of a single copy. But also the fact that it gives your Vanguard plus 5k power is so essential for Agravain, as just like I explained with Kudadegius, your Vanguard is going to swing for 12k. So increasing that power to at least bump up over force numbers is so essential to sustain the rush playstyle that this deck thrives from. So for that, I'm going to give it 4 stars, as it's just a solid +1 on the whole engine itself. And you might think Soul Blasting 1 is bad if you want to go for the Soul Blast 12, but actually it's a Soul Blast 0 in that regard, as you're not going to call a card from your hand to minus, so you're not going to get that extra card in Soul with Agravain's ability. But by Soul Blasting 1, you get another card on the field, so it goes into the Soul, so it's net 0 on your Soul count. It doesn't really matter that much, unless you called on top of another unit that's already present on the field. Then it's a different story. But to be fair, you're probably not going to play actually around the Soul Blast 12. You mainly go for the multi-tech potential and want to go for most consistency as possible. And the way that you get that best consistency is by calling a lot of units in the main phase, so you can call even more units or have more choice in what to call during the battle phase. So with that card covered, we go back to the VR and we can understand how this build works. So we have Knight of Fury Agravain that allows us for 1 counterblast and shoving everything into the soul to then reload the board once again for some insane multi-attacks. This ability basically fuels all your effects that works with calling 2 or more or 4 or more cards, as probably you cannot always sustain that in the main phase by calling everything from hand. Luckily, we do have cards like full Cavalier Dragon and Liberator of the Flute Escrad that can help us get free cards to the field and fuel and also load Agravain even more. But basically what the gist of it is that with the extra superior call during the battle phase, you 100% fulfill the call for more rear guards during the turn, which makes all those units all the more better during that stage of the game. Also, we have, of course, his Soul Blast 12 ability, but we're mainly not gonna focus around it as it's very late game, even if everything went right for us, but we do have some ways to fuel it with cards like the Grade 1 Angel that once it calls, it goes so you can call again. Also, full Cavalier Dragon, although it's Soul Blast, it still retains 0 on Soul, which makes the first skill better. And we even have the Grade 1 Brennius from, I believe, Miyagi Academy set, that can also goes into Soul and calls a unit, which then fuel this card even more. That makes it even all the more better. So Agravain has a lot of good tools to its disposal from this set, but also from pre-existing sets, because even something like Listener of Truth Dindrain, which was somewhat limited with the amount of Soul, suddenly becomes a lot better, as you can just Soul Blasting everything away for its ability if you don't go for the Soul Blast 12 ability, and then you can countercharge, draw a lot of more cards more consistently. With that all in mind, Agravain is, in my opinion, a solid 4-star card, and I know what you might think. You might say, well, this should be a 5-star card. But if you just look at this card, there is a problem with the card in general, which will not make it a 5-star range card, in my opinion, as its second ability, we can just write it off. It's probably never going to be a case unless far in the future when we suddenly get super Soul Charge Engine for golds. But it's mainly its first ability. But there's a problem with its first ability inherently, and that's it will never be able to get boosted. So it's a 12k unit on its own, unless we combine it with Hoel, but it's one specific condition and you need to call it off its ability to get that power. So it's very limited in that sense. Meaning the Vanguard will not really pressure on its own. You need triggers for that. And also, all your other rearguards are very one-dimensional use, and you're also very dependent on what you're gonna call off. Also, you need to be hitting your key pieces like Escrad or full Cavalier Dragon to load this effect up. Otherwise, you need to waste your hand to get effectively enough calls out of it to then go ham for the following turn to attack it. But most of your attacks, unless you have something like Eleanor on the field, are gonna be stopped by defensive trigger. And that's not ideal. So you're somewhat forced to run fronts, but if you run fronts, that means your Vanguard really doesn't have any pressure without the crits and whatsoever, and you don't have any other crits kind of pressure, makes it somewhat awkward. And this is basically the main reason why people have been calling Agravain, Tachikaze, or Anger Blader light. Because they basically do the same. They're very high rolly, they can win the game on the first grade 3 turn or maybe the following turn. But the problem is, Agravain is more easily stopped and need in some contests a bit more RNG luck to get your things off, unlike Tachi. Because Tachi only needs to have the right key pieces and they basically win the game. They don't care what kind of defense trigger your opponents are going to get because their units are going to beat over your opponent's field without a problem because they hit so hard. And the Vanguard itself will always come with pressure because it will gain 5k, meaning it will be a 70k unit. And with the booster, that's a 23 or higher column, which means any type of clan is gonna get pressured even if they get a defensive trigger before the Vanguard attacks. Agravain isn't the same in that regard. It will have more attacks, but all those attacks are pokes. Even Glory Maelstrom will be more consistent in that aspect because Glory Maelstrom can give that extra power onto the front row. That power deviation between Agravain and all the other clans makes this card a 4-star in my opinion and not a 5-star. But the support around it is what's making this card such an insane deck. And that's basically everything for the Gold Paladin set review. We've seen a lot of interesting cards. We've seen, of course, some generic support. We also had the 24k base grade 3, which was interesting. And we saw 2 distinctive support. One for more the Garmor engine with a 1 or less restriction. And also the new type of superior call condition where we want to call 2 or more units or 4 more units to activate certain abilities or certain stages of an ability of a card. So overall, very interesting stuff. And what's very interesting about the whole Gold Paladin right now is that at the beginning when the first set wave was dropped with Blood SL, Soul was basically non-existent and you really need to scramble if you want to use a 1 soulless skill. Like Listener of Truth Dindrain was almost an impossible thing to activate on a consistent basis because you also have things like Sacramore. And Pelionor was already written off when we saw the Soul Blast 3 at the time. But right now, we're overloaded with the amount of soul that we don't know what to do with it anymore. But we're still not at the stage where Soul Blasting 12 is a consistent thing on turn 3 or turn 4. But who knows, maybe this will change in the future. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of all the new Gold Paladin cards. Are you agreeing with some of the ratings? Do you think I might have been a bit harsh on some cards or a bit too lenient on certain cards? Let me know in the comments down below all your thoughts, opinions, and suggestions for how certain cards should be rated or used. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, then stick around on the channel because we're diving into many more topics around the Mysterious Fortune, as this was the first of 3 set reviews, and next time we're gonna dive into Great Nature, followed up with Neo Nectar. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at Patreon. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply do that by heading over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. Well, with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!